Let's cross over to you now, Aviwe. Maybe just speak to us about what sense you are getting from people within the Eastern Cape. I think one of the most devastating stories from the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, was how one of the first COVID-19 funerals was, in fact, in the Eastern Cape.
Certainly, we took that live, Heidi. Remember, we were in the former Transkei covering that funeral live. It was from the Soyizwapi family, where it was two relatives, two family members, and just how that funeral played out with seeing those both coffins and how the family, it was about 7 members of the family, just how then we had to be accustomed to the new norm, they'd call it. But of course, the Eastern Cape was largely in the spotlight, especially in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, story after story with nurses' strike, inadequate PPEs at the fore. But as the months went in, that picture changed quite significantly, and I remember even the President Cyril Ramaphosa even commending the efforts that were put in the Eastern Cape in turning around the situation. And of course, even now it was noted as the leading province when it comes to the vaccine drive. Of course, at the helm of that was the MEC of Health at that time, Cindy Swakomba, who joins us now, one of the persons that, in fact, we were at loggerheads time and again. Former MEC, thank you for joining us at eNCA. But I want us to reflect back when the President mentioned that this COVID-19 pandemic has hit the country, and in fact, you're going on to lockdown. Your preparations, and we know the Eastern Cape has one of the ailing infrastructures, especially at the time when you look at the health and the hospitals in their entirety. Your preparations for the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, well, you are making me go back to exactly a time that we're in frenzy and we're panicking, and we were just in grips with understanding our infrastructure and beds and everything else. And you may be right to say the history of health at the time. And now to be hit with a pandemic, it then said to us, we must be on our toes. You know, when the President announced, Eastern Cape didn't immediately get to be having patients. We were a bit relaxed. We had time to prepare, though the preparation needed resources which were not there. So we started to actually think about what will we do if it comes to us. I remember the doctors, led by Dr. Mengashe, they came with an idea that we should have field hospitals. And as we embraced that in our first interview, I really felt if we're given funds, this is an opportunity to improve the infrastructure of the Eastern Cape, which then would be of COVID. And I immediately contacted the Premier, and I said, Premier, I don't think we're going to go the route of field hospitals. What are we going to do? We're going to renovate open beds in our own facilities. Well, when that came, we immediately found that we can't do it because our major job and responsibility is health. Infrastructure, we immediately spoke to Department of Public Works. What then we did was to immediately at the same time develop a strategy as to how we're going to deal with COVID. However, I must actually admit, because we didn't have pressure, we're not moving that fast in the strategy. Until on the 22nd of March, we had our first case, which was a lady from Italy, and we admitted her in Madwaleni, and she coped very well. The second patient was from Daimler Chrysler in our area, who had just returned from Germany. The third patient was from Port Elizabeth. And you know what actually made us run was when we had a funeral both in PE and in Port St. John's of a former nurse, and nurses were there. The PE one made a vast spread in PE. The Port St. John's one took us back to the correctional services where we had an outbreak. So those are the two main areas that really made us run. And in that running, we flattened the hierarchy of health so that there is no way that you are going to wait for a DDG to make a decision. Everybody now knows we are in teams or in clusters, we are working. And we immediately segmented the Eastern Cape into hotspots. And in that, we took a decision of creating teams. We immediately checked the office of the minister to assist us. NICD came on board. World Health Organization came on board. Up to a point when our hospitals were challenged, we approached ILO.
I'm about to go to that point because there was even an expose that we did with my colleague Ngabantlanga in Port Elizabeth where the hospitals were overfull to the time where we were seeing people dying, not even in the wards, some of them dying in just the passages themselves. And that even led to the president having a special lockdown for the Nelson Mandela Bay area. How did you then deal with that challenge of over-capacitated hospitals by COVID-19?
This is what actually necessitated us opening up the embankment area, which was initially for 2010 World Cup. That's the area we first started with, which we put beds and put everything, and we opened space in Livingston. And coupled with that, we immediately moved, because we're still not having enough space, we moved to Doranginza, where we had the old hospital, which was just in ruins. And that we immediately put into wards, and it worked for us. And coming back from PE, remember, it was the time that we didn't have an HOD for that or a district manager. Even the hospitals were having acting people. That's the time we moved Dr. Matiwane to go and work in PE in that area. And that worked. However, we went back because, remember, PE joins the area which is a buffer to Western Cape, and Western Cape was very much under stress with with COVID at the time. Sorry. So that meant that at least we're doing something in PE, and we immediately get to other areas. There was also a challenge with Buffalo City. For Buffalo City, we immediately identified an old ward, which was mental health ward in Frey. We opened it up for COVID. We went to Tanzania, Cecilia Makiwane, the old casualty area. We renovated it and we put beds and everything else. The old hospital was working. We went to Mtata, we went to Sir Henry Elliot, which was also a very strong infrastructure, and we actually put it up. Today, we're proud to say those are highlights. However, we have got good areas where, like your Statarai, which became the best in actually dealing with COVID, led by Dr. Kodongwan, whom I'm proud now, who actually was recognized for South Africa as a runner-up as the best doctor. One of the issues that we were having challenge on was the whole issue of oxygen. And for oxygen, we immediately went on bulk oxygen.
Bulk oxygen, this time that's against us, that's the major challenge. Former MEC Cindy Swakomba. So much to talk about, but we'll do that just now, as of course we do understand the challenges of time. That's the former MEC of the Eastern Cape, MEC at one of the most difficult times as we were going into the COVID-19 pandemic, with the numbers that were soaring at the time in the Eastern Cape.
Certainly. Thank you so much for that update, Aviwe Mtila, who's out in the Eastern Cape for us.